Hollywood hides many secrets, but few are as haunting as the death of Natalie Wood. She was America's sweetheart, a dazzling star of West Side Story and rebel without a cause, adored by millions. But in 1981, she vanished beneath the dark waters off Catalina Island under circumstances that have baffled investigators, family, and fans for over 4 decades. Official reports called it an accident, but bruises on her body, conflicting witness accounts, and a trail of silence told a very different story. Now, 43 years later, her tomb has been reopened, and what was found inside has shocked the world. Was it an accident? Was it a cover-up? Or was Hollywood protecting one of its own? Tonight, we peel back the curtain on one of Tinseltown's darkest mysteries. Stay with us until the very end, because the truth buried with Natalie Wood is more chilling and more heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Natalie Wood was born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko on July 20, 1938, in San Francisco, California. Her parents were Russian immigrants, deeply traditional and fiercely determined to carve out a better life for their family. Her mother, Maria, believed passionately that Natalie was destined for greatness. To Maria, Hollywood was not just an industry, it was a pathway to immortality. From the time she could walk, Natalie was groomed for the camera. Her childhood was not like that of most American children in the 1940s. Instead of playgrounds and dolls, her world revolved around auditions, lessons, and the constant push of a mother who believed fame was the only way forward. Natalie later admitted that she never truly had a childhood. She was working almost as soon as she could speak. Her first break came at the tender age of 4, when she appeared in a small part in the 1943 film Happyland. Though just a fleeting role, her natural charm caught the eye of directors. But it was Miracle on 34th Street in 1947 that transformed her into a household name. At only 8 years old, Natalie became the face of Christmas magic, embodying innocence and wonder. Behind the scenes, however, her life was far from magical. Maria's intense control over her daughter's every move left Natalie conflicted, yearning for freedom but trapped by the destiny her mother imposed. From the very beginning, I didn't know where the acting stopped and I began, Natalie once confessed. The little girl from San Francisco was now firmly in Hollywood's spotlight, but at a cost. Childhood friendships faded, privacy vanished, and the weight of stardom settled heavily on her small shoulders. Natalie Wood was no longer Natalia Zakharenko, she was Hollywood property. As Natalie grew, so did her career. Unlike many child stars who faded into obscurity, she successfully transitioned into more mature roles, a notoriously difficult leap in Hollywood. By her teenage years, Natalie was already a veteran of the screen, with more than a dozen films to her credit. Her breakout as a young woman came with Rebel Without a Cause in 1955. Starring alongside James Dean, Natalie played Judy, a troubled teenager seeking love and acceptance. The role mirrored much of her own inner conflict, and her raw performance earned her an Academy Award nomination. Overnight, Natalie was no longer just the sweet girl from Miracle on 34th Street. She was a serious actress with depth and emotional intensity. The success of Rebel catapulted her into Hollywood's elite. Studios clamored for her presence, directors admired her ability to embody complex characters, and fans adore her beauty. But Natalie was not content with fame alone. She craved roles that challenged her, roles that reflected the struggles she herself lived through. In 1961, she starred in West Side Story, one of the most iconic musicals ever produced. Though her singing voice was dubbed, Natalie's portrayal of Maria captured audiences worldwide. That same year, she dazzled in Splendor in the Grass, a harrowing exploration of love, repression, and mental health. Her performance earned her another Academy Award nomination and cemented her as one of the leading actresses of her generation. By the mid-1960s, Natalie Wood was at the pinnacle of Hollywood success. She was young, talented, beautiful, and admired. But with every triumph came deeper shadows. She struggled privately with self-doubt, vulnerability, and a gnawing sense that she was never truly in control of her own life. Her fame was a double-edged sword, adored by millions but haunted by insecurities that fame could never erase. The little girl forced into stardom was now a woman trying to reconcile the world's expectations with her own fragile heart. The 1950s and 60s were often called the golden era of Hollywood, and Natalie was at its very center. This was the age of glamour, of red carpets and flashing cameras, of contracts that bound actors to studios, and of an industry that demanded perfection at any cost. For women especially, the pressures were crushing. Natalie became not just a star, but a symbol of that golden age. Her face appeared on magazine covers, her name was whispered in headlines, and her life was dissected by fans who believed they knew her. Yet, behind the glamour, Natalie's story was one of survival. She navigated an industry dominated by powerful men, where actresses were too often treated as commodities rather than artists. Her beauty opened doors, but it also brought unwanted attention and expectations. Studio executives dictated not just her roles, but often her appearance, behavior, and even relationships. Despite these pressures, Natalie fought for her place as a serious actress. She turned down roles she considered shallow, fought against being typecast, and sought characters that reflected real human struggles. For a time, she succeeded, standing alongside contemporaries like Elizabeth Taylor and Audrey Hepburn as one of the defining talents of her era. But the very industry that elevated her also consumed her. The golden era glittered, but its brilliance was blinding, hiding cracks that would later shatter lives. For Natalie Wood, Hollywood was both a gift and a curse. It gave her fame, fortune, and immortality, but it also set her on a path toward the most tragic chapter of her story. Hollywood has always adored love stories that sparkle with glamour, passion, and drama. And few romances captured the public's imagination like that of Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner. They were the golden couple, both impossibly beautiful, both at the top of their careers, both embodying the very image of old Hollywood romance. Natalie first met Robert when she was just 18 years old. He was 8 years her senior, an established actor with striking good looks and a reputation for charm. For Natalie, still navigating the chaos of early stardom, Robert represented stability and sophistication. Their courtship was swift, passionate, and very public. Gossip columns buzzed with their appearances, and magazines labeled them Hollywood royalty. In 1957, they married in a lavish ceremony that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. For a time, it appeared to be a perfect match, two stars, deeply in love, building a life together. But Hollywood love stories often unravel under the relentless glare of fame. By 1962, just 5 years later, their marriage had crumbled, and they divorced amidst whispers of infidelity, jealousy, and career conflicts. Yet fate wasn't finished with them. Nearly a decade later, in 1972, after failed relationships on both sides, Natalie and Robert found each other again. Their rekindled romance fascinated the public even more than their first union. To outsiders, it looked like destiny, two lovers meant to be, who had found their way back after years apart. They remarried in 1972, determined to make it work this time. Behind the smiles, however, tension simmered. Natalie's career had slowed, while Robert struggled for stability. Both carried insecurities, both bore the scars of Hollywood's pressures. Their love story was intense, passionate, but also volatile. Friends recalled their relationship as fiery, marked by jealousy, arguments, and dramatic reconciliations. Natalie, always sensitive and vulnerable, longed for security, while Robert, proud and sometimes possessive, struggled with his own demons. It was a marriage of love, yes, but also of turbulence. And as the years passed, the cracks widened. What began as Hollywood's greatest romance would soon be overshadowed by suspicion, tragedy, and unanswered questions that linger to this day. By the mid-1970s, Hollywood had changed. The golden era was gone, replaced by grittier storytelling and younger stars who reflected a new generation's rebellion. For Natalie, who had been working since childhood, it was a difficult transition. Her name still carried prestige, but roles for women in their 30s were scarce, especially in an industry that worshipped youth. Natalie chose her projects carefully, appearing in select films and television movies, balancing her desire to act with her growing responsibilities as a wife and mother. In 1976, she starred in the television miniseries From Here to Eternity, which earned her a Golden Globe. It was proof that her talent had not faded. Yet Natalie herself confessed to close friends that she often felt overshadowed by her past roles, forever tied to Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story. At home, she embraced her role as mother to her daughters, Natasha and Courtney. She longed to provide them with the stable childhood she herself never had. But balancing family with career and love with ambition was never simple. By the late 1970s, Natalie began preparing for a return to the big screen. She accepted a role in the science fiction thriller Brainstorm alongside Christopher Walken, an actor admired for his intensity and mysterious charisma. It was meant to be her comeback, a new chapter in a career that had already spanned decades. But while her career seemed poised for revival, her personal life was increasingly fragile. Tensions between Natalie and Robert Wagner grew. Rumors circulated that Natalie was drawn to Walken, sparking jealousy in Wagner. Whether true or not, the whispers fed into a storm that was about to engulf them all. November 28, 1981. Thanksgiving weekend. Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain Dennis Davern set out on Wagner's yacht, Splendor, for a trip to Catalina Island. What was meant to be a relaxing weekend quickly spiraled into one of Hollywood's darkest tragedies. The day began peacefully, with laughter, food, and drinks. But as night fell, tensions rose. Accounts differ on exactly what happened aboard the yacht that evening, but what is certain is that alcohol flowed heavily, arguments broke out, and emotions ran high. Dennis Davern later admitted that he heard heated exchanges between Natalie and Robert, as well as between Robert and Christopher Walken. The precise cause of the arguments remains clouded in mystery. Some say it was jealousy, others claim it was about Natalie's career, and still others insist it was nothing unusual for the volatile couple. At some point during the night, Natalie disappeared. No one knows exactly how. The official story claims she left the yacht in a small dinghy, perhaps trying to escape the tension. But Natalie had a lifelong fear of deep water. Friends insisted she would never willingly take a dinghy out alone in the dark. Hours later, at 7:44 a.m. on November 29th, her body was found floating face down in the waters near Catalina. She was dressed in a flannel nightgown, socks, and a red down jacket. The dinghy was discovered nearby, drifting silently in the water.
The world was stunned.
News of her death spread rapidly, leaving fans in disbelief. How could a woman so vibrant, so alive, be gone at just 43? The official coroner's report listed her death as an accidental drowning. But bruises on her body, marks on her arms and legs, and unanswered questions about the events of that night left many unconvinced. Christopher Walken never publicly spoke about what happened in detail. Robert Wagner insisted it was a tragic accident. Dennis Davern, however, hinted at darker truths, ones that would only emerge decades later. What really happened on the yacht that night remains one of Hollywood's greatest mysteries. But for Natalie Wood, the golden girl of Hollywood, it was the tragic final chapter of a life that had dazzled millions and left the world aching for answers. When the news of Natalie Wood's death reached the public on November 29, 1981, the world was paralyzed with shock. How could one of Hollywood's brightest stars, still young, vibrant, and full of plans for the future, suddenly vanish into the cold Pacific waters? Authorities rushed to piece together what had happened that night aboard Splendor. The official report came together quickly. Natalie, after an evening of drinking, had somehow attempted to board or untie the dinghy, slipped and drowned. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office ruled her death an accidental drowning, closing the case within days. But even in 1981, cracks in the story were glaring. Natalie had been found floating just 200 yards from the yacht, fully clothed in a flannel nightgown, socks, and a red jacket. Bruises marked her arms and legs, with abrasions on her cheek. These injuries were noted in the autopsy, but brushed aside as consistent with a fall into the water. The dinghy, too, raised questions. It was found drifting with its oars locked in place, suggesting it had not been used. Adding to the unease were inconsistencies in witness statements. Robert Wagner told investigators he assumed Natalie had gone to bed, only to realize later she was missing. Christopher Walken offered little, insisting he had gone to his cabin and heard nothing unusual. Dennis Davern, the yacht's captain, initially supported Wagner's version of events, saying it must have been a tragic accident. Still, whispers of suspicion persisted. The media covered Natalie's death intensely, yet most outlets leaned into the tragic accident narrative, hesitant to accuse Hollywood royalty of wrongdoing. Newspapers ran glossy spreads of Natalie's glamorous life alongside somber reports of her watery grave. The case was closed, the conclusion reached. But many, even then, were not satisfied. Natalie's fear of deep water was well known. Friends insisted she would never climb into a dinghy alone at night. Something about the official story simply didn't add up. In the absence of clear answers, theories began to swirl almost immediately. The most persistent centered on jealousy. Rumors circulated that Robert Wagner had grown increasingly suspicious of Natalie's co-star, Christopher Walken. Brainstorm had placed them in close working quarters, and whispers of an affair, or at least an emotional closeness, spread quickly. On the night of the tragedy, according to some reports, Wagner confronted Walken and Natalie, leading to a heated argument. Dennis Davern would later confirm that tempers had indeed flared. He recalled a shouting match between Wagner and Natalie, with Walken caught in the middle. What exactly was said has never been confirmed, but the suggestion of a marital dispute in the hours before Natalie's death became central to countless theories. Some believed Natalie attempted to leave the yacht after the fight, seeking escape from the tension, only to slip and fall. Others suspected that the argument may have turned physical, leaving Natalie injured before she ever hit the water. And then there was the haunting detail of Natalie's lifelong fear of water. Friends and colleagues recounted how she had been terrified of dark, open waters since childhood. Why, then, would she climb into a dinghy alone at night, after drinking? To many, the scenario seemed implausible. Tabloids thrived on the speculation, splashing sensational headlines about Hollywood's love triangle and the mystery of Natalie's last night. Fans debated endlessly, was it truly an accident, or was something darker being hidden? Theories multiplied. Some suggested Wagner had tried to prevent Natalie from leaving the yacht, resulting in an accidental push or struggle. Others went further, alleging deliberate foul play. And while Wagner remained mostly silent, his very silence fueled intrigue. One fact was undeniable: Natalie Wood's death was anything but straightforward. In the days following Natalie's death, her family was engulfed in grief. Her daughters, Natasha and Courtney, were too young to understand the tidal wave of tragedy that had struck. Robert Wagner, now both grieving husband and single father, retreated into silence. To the outside world, his stoicism looked like sorrow. To some, it looked like evasion. Natalie's sister, Lana Wood, struggled with the loss in her own way. Unlike Wagner, she did not accept the accidental drowning explanation so easily. In interviews, she expressed doubts, voicing what so many fans already suspected, that the official story did not capture the truth. Her stance, however, put her at odds with Wagner, deepening rifts within the family.
Hollywood, too, remained largely silent.
While colleagues mourned Natalie's death, few dared to publicly question Wagner, a powerful and respected figure. The culture of the time demanded deference, especially toward a grieving widower. To raise suspicions was seen as disrespectful, even scandalous. The tabloids, however, had no such reservations. They seized upon the mystery, publishing story after story filled with speculation, innuendo, and half-truths. Fans devoured every word, unable to reconcile the glamorous images of Natalie with the grim reality of her final hours. Public curiosity never waned. Her grave at Westwood Village Memorial Park became a pilgrimage site for admirers. Visitors left flowers, letters, and messages, many of them not just expressions of love, but also pleas for the truth. The silence of those closest to Natalie, contrasted with the loud speculation of the press, created a haunting vacuum. The truth seemed buried, locked away with her in her tomb. And for decades, it would remain that way. For 30 years, the official record remained unchanged: Natalie Wood had drowned accidentally. But time has a way of loosening lips, and in 2011, the silence finally broke. Dennis Davern, the yacht captain who had once supported Wagner's version of events, changed his story. In interviews and in a book, he admitted he had lied in 1981 out of fear and loyalty. He now claimed that Wagner had argued violently with Natalie on the night of her death, and that he believed Wagner was directly responsible for what happened. His new testimony electrified the case. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the investigation, re-examining the evidence with fresh eyes. Forensic experts restudied the autopsy, paying closer attention to the bruises on Natalie's body. Some concluded that the injuries were not consistent with a simple fall into the water, but rather suggested a struggle. In 2012, the coroner's office amended Natalie's death certificate, changing the cause from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. It was a small but seismic shift, officially acknowledging that her death was not fully explained. The media frenzy reignited. Documentaries, books, and endless talk show debates dissected every angle. Robert Wagner, once shielded by silence, now faced growing suspicion. By 2018, investigators named him a person of interest in the case, though he continued to deny any wrongdoing and refused further interviews with authorities. For fans who had never accepted the official version, the reopening of the case felt like vindication. For others, it deepened the tragedy, suggesting Natalie had not only died too soon but perhaps unjustly, her final moments obscured by lies. The truth, it seemed, was closer than ever, but still agonizingly out of reach. And as the years passed, the myth of Natalie Wood only grew, her tomb a silent witness to the mystery that refused to die. Natalie Wood was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, the same resting place as Marilyn Monroe, Dean Martin, and other Hollywood legends. Her grave became a place of pilgrimage. Fans left flowers, handwritten letters, and photographs, often whispering prayers or confessions at her headstone. But as the years passed, myths began to form. Whispers circulated that her tomb had been tampered with, that investigators had secretly returned to her remains in search of overlooked evidence. Some claimed notes, jewelry, or even personal effects had been buried with her, items that might hold clues to her final night. None of these rumors were ever substantiated, but they took on a life of their own. For those who believed Natalie had not died by accident, her grave became more than a memorial, it became a locked vault of hidden truth. The mythology only deepened as true crime culture exploded in the 1990s and 2000s. Fans speculated that if Natalie's tomb were ever opened, modern forensic science might finally solve the mystery. DNA analysis, advanced toxicology, and injury mapping, all tools unavailable in 1981, could bring clarity to the bruises and injuries on her body. Over time, her grave came to symbolize the silence surrounding her death. It was not just Natalie buried there, but also the unanswered questions. And in the minds of many, reopening her tomb became synonymous with reopening the truth. In 2025, whispers began circulating again. Journalists, online sleuths, and conspiracy theorists claimed that Natalie's tomb had been reopened 43 years after her death. The mere suggestion sent shockwaves through Hollywood and around the world. Yet the story took on a symbolic power far greater than any literal truth. To Natalie's fans, reopening her tomb became a metaphor for reopening the case, for once again confronting the haunting questions that refused to die. The timing was powerful. By then, generations who had not even been alive in 1981 were captivated by Natalie's story through documentaries, podcasts, and streaming specials. The myth of her reopened tomb played directly into a culture obsessed with justice delayed and justice denied. For her sister Lana, and for others who never accepted the official story, the idea of reopening Natalie's grave was not grotesque, it was necessary. To them, it was not desecration but closure. If the body could speak through modern science, perhaps it would whisper the truth that had been silenced for so long. Whether literal or symbolic, the idea of disturbing Natalie's resting place captured the world's imagination. 43 years after her body was pulled from the waters near Catalina, Natalie Wood's story had risen again to dominate headlines. And then came the question everyone feared: if the tomb was reopened, what did they find? The most shocking revelations came not from Hollywood rumor mills, but from forensic science. Advances in technology, combined with the re-examination of autopsy reports, revealed troubling inconsistencies that deepened the mystery. Natalie's bruises, once dismissed as the result of a fall into the water, were reinterpreted by experts. Some believed they were consistent with defensive injuries, marks from being grabbed or restrained. Others pointed out the unusual abrasions on her arms and legs, which seemed less like accidental scrapes and more like evidence of a struggle. Her blood alcohol level, moderate but not extreme, was also revisited. Experts noted that while alcohol could have impaired her, it would not explain the pattern of bruising. The chilling conclusion: Natalie's body told a story far more complicated than accidental drowning. While no evidence definitively proved foul play, the physical signs suggested she had not simply slipped quietly into the sea. Public reaction was explosive. Fans who had long suspected a cover-up felt vindicated. Outrage swept across social media, with many calling for Robert Wagner, now in his 90s, to finally face direct questioning. Hollywood figures who had once stayed silent spoke out, some cautiously, others passionately, demanding justice for Natalie. But just as in 1981, the case remained mired in ambiguity. The new findings raised more questions than they answered. Was it an accident compounded by negligence? A fight that went too far? Or something darker, deliberately hidden for decades? They found bruises, one report summarized, but they didn't find the truth. In the end, what the world discovered after 43 years was not closure, but confirmation of what fans had always feared, that Natalie Wood's death was far from a simple accident. The shock was not just in the science, but in the realization that one of Hollywood's greatest mysteries might never be solved. Her tomb had been symbolically reopened, her body re-examined, and yet the haunting silence remained. Natalie Wood, even in death, remained elusive, forever caught between legend and mystery, between love and tragedy, between truth and shadow. Natalie Wood's story proves that even the brightest stars can hide the darkest secrets. Her life was filled with beauty, talent, and triumph, but her death left behind more questions than answers. And now, with every new revelation, the mystery only grows deeper. If this story shocked you, if you want to uncover more hidden truths and Hollywood's untold secrets, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss the next in uncovering the scandals, mysteries, and heartbreaking stories that the world was never meant to see.